I think for me and for many of my generation, the coming of the third programme changed our lives. It certainly changed mine. I was 15 in 1946, terribly precocious, very bent on going into the theatre and opera, obsessed by the drama, obsessed by music, hoping to go to university. And suddenly there was all this stuff flooding out every night, which was challenging and surprising. I heard loads of plays that I'd never seen, certainly lots of Elizabethan plays, I remember, Webster, Turner, Ford, Beaumont and Fletcher. But most of all, I remember the first drama of the third programme, first one of all, which was Man and Superman in full, with Sebastian Shaw, who later, in his maturity and old age, became an old friend and a staunch member of the Royal Shakespeare Company, Esme Percy, who was very, very close to Shaw, who I also later worked with several times and quizzed about Shaw, and Griselda Harvey, who was a kind of golden voice, all-purpose BBC repertory actress, but who had astonishing wit. Anyway, the whole play was there, stretched out through the whole evening, and I couldn't believe my eyes or my luck. But Man and Superman remains a golden memory. Well, see, this is before television, and one used to concentrate on the radio. I mean, radio is still an extraordinarily popular and potent medium, but it's now the thing that goes on while we're doing other things. I mean, all the stage designers I know live in a wash of Radio 4 while they design their sets. I personally find that terribly difficult. I mean, I cannot listen to music and do something else. I cannot have music as background. Music is too involving for me. But I remember listening to the whole play and really following it. I think radio drama is a great freer of the imagination. A radio production doesn't have to be as good as a stage production, because you can imagine the physical and visual dimension to your heart's content. I remember the broadcast being more potent. I've had a sort of love-hate relationship with Shaw all my life. I've never done a Shaw play in the theatre. I've put him on as an impresario, as a manager, but I've never actually directed him. Some days I feel that Shaw's characters don't do what they want to do, but what he wants them to do. Some days I feel he manipulates drama for soapbox purposes. I mean, he is the great soapbox writer. He's a great rhetorician, and he's a marvellous speaker. He's a marvellous polemicist. He's marvellous at rhetoric. But nonetheless, only his greatest plays, it seems to me, have enough humanity in them to excuse their absolute intellectual brilliance. And I would put Man and Superman high on the list. I mean, Man and Superman, Major Barbara, Heartbreak House, I think are three masterpieces, and some of the early ones, Widowers' Houses, I love very much. I've approached Man and Superman more than once, and then thought, well, it's impossible to do in the modern theatre, because it doesn't make any sense without the famous third act, the Don Juan in Hell episode, which makes it a play of gargantuan proportions, I mean, nearly Wagnerian, over 4 hours. Without that, I think it's a rather lightweight domestic comedy. With the whole thing, you can, however, though, get right into the heart of Shaw's philosophy and what Shaw was driving on about. So, when the Radio 3 asked me if I would like to do a commemorative production, I, for nostalgic reasons, said yes, primarily, I think. Nostalgic because I remember the first production, and because I believe passionately in what the third programme stood for. Less, I'm bound to say, in what Radio 3 stands for, because I think the perpetual excusing itself and telling the audience not to be frightened of its standards or the height of its brow is a sign of current times and pretty worrying. In fact, the first request I had over Man and Superman was that if I wanted to do it, when could they have my cuts? And I said, cuts? You didn't cut it in 1946. And they said, oh no, I'm sure we didn't, but I mean, times change and we've got to think of our audience. To which I replied, you don't have to think of your audience, you have
Sample complete. Ready to continue?